And good morning to you. It's Thursday, yes. Terrific Thursday today. That's what we'll all make it. Remember, there's Q coming up today as well. So there's a lot to be excited about. It's day 2 of the new mask mandate. So we'll get to find out how some of you are feeling about that. But the first thing up that we're going to deal with is risk management. Yes, we're in the hurricane season, but that's not the only risk that we have to deal with. No, there are more things out there happening that we need to be aware of. And we have an expert with us this morning, Mr. Ken Hackshaw, who's a risk management consultant and the founder and CEO of the Caribbean Risk Management Academy and the Trinidad and Tobago Risk Management Institute. Good morning to you, Ken Hackshaw.
Good morning, Wendy. How are you?
I am great. What about you?
I am good, thank you.
Right. And
Thanks
I guess
for having me.
Not a problem. Always a pleasure. Now, you're going to be having your 4th Caribbean Enterprise Risk Conference coming up in June, on the 15th to be precise. And you're doing it a little differently now because of COVID. So it's going to be a hybrid, yes. But the theme is very interesting. From vulnerable to resilient to anti-fragile, the new risk frontier, Caribbean and international. You know, risk practitioners should be part of this. Tell me how we're going to go through those phases within the region.
Well, that's actually a well-framed question, and so it's not just for risk practitioners, because you just mentioned that in Barbados you guys are going to have a new mask mandate, and you also mentioned that we're in the midst of the hurricane season. So all of those two things and many more examples fall under the ambit of good risk management. And so it's very timely that we're doing this conference. You know, we are living in COVID, so we call it the intra-COVID period. I don't believe that we are going to ever have a post-COVID. So you're intra-COVID, you're in a hurricane season. You have these new mandates, even so I'm in Florida right now, even in certain parts of the U.S., governments are revisiting the mandates around mask wearing. So the conference is timely for the Caribbean. It's Caribbean themed. So we'll be discussing things like tourism and hospitality, energy, finance, and technology. And it's for anyone, any leader, any practitioner that is interested in protecting not just their national borders, but their own personal borders. So knowing more about risk management is incumbent upon all of us in the Caribbean.
Okay, now you've broken it down into segments. We're looking at risk and leadership, and then we're looking at risk and governance. What's the differentiation between the two?
Well, there's little difference between governance and leadership. Leadership, for the most part, speaks to who's going to drive this wagon, how effective they are. Governance is a much larger embrace of the risk management practice. So it includes leadership, it includes good processes, good procedures, good laws, good regulations. So we talk about risk governance, which is that overarching umbrella, if you will, as to how effective will your risk management practices be. So that includes the leadership or the people aspect of it. And that's pretty critical because, as I like to say, if you can't think it, you can't act on it. And, my criticism, if I could use that word, of some of our leaders in the Caribbean is that they are not versed enough in the conversation around effective risk management, especially when we speak about going just beyond resilience. And so that goes back to the theme of the conference. And we're living in a much more fluid, much more volatile and uncertain period, and it's going to be like that for many years to come. And so our leaders have to get on board with a new level of thinking as it relates to managing the risks to the population, to the organizations. And again, that's where the conference comes into play.
Now, my issue with this anti-fragile aspect. We're within the
Mhm.
Caribbean, the small island developing states. We are
Yeah,
facing a massive threat from climate change.
yeah,
So
yeah.
every day something else happens that creates greater fragility for us. So we're
Yes,
already battling with the resilience aspect of it. How
yeah.
can you and some of the other speakers you have on board tell us about how to become anti-fragile?
Well, again, very, very good question. I need to write that down for some of the other folks. Here's the thing, Wendy. We are a very reactive society in the Caribbean, and I remember doing a podcast with a senior CARICOM leader, and he said to me that most of the time we love to spend to repair or fix, but not spend to prevent. Yeah, and so I think in the Caribbean countries we are very vulnerable. Yeah. So what we need to do then is as far as we can reduce our vulnerabilities, which will then lead to us becoming a bit more resilient. The next step is, and we have to start thinking it. Remember I said earlier, if you can't think it, you can't act on it. So if we are constantly outing fires, if we are constantly reacting, if we are constantly fixing, then there will be little room, if any, for us to be more resilient, and then just going beyond resilient, which is what we talk about in the anti-fragile space. So it's not just bouncing back, is moving beyond just bouncing back. It becomes, we start thinking about, okay, how can we be more prepared for the eventualities? So things like hurricane, we have little control over that, but we could be more resilient, that when these things do come, not if, but when they do come, there's going to be less impact to the people, to the infrastructure of our Caribbean entities, and it goes beyond whether it's in the energy space, the tourism space, the finance space, and I respectfully submit we aren't doing enough of that. We aren't doing enough of that, and again, hence the reason for the folks who'll be speaking at the conference that will address, okay, how do we go beyond resilience? It's not just a talk shop, because there are companies now who are working and living in the anti-fragile space. Some folks aren't too accurate with that term anti-fragility, but in the simplest form, it's just going beyond resilience. It's not just, okay, something happened, we're resilient, so we bounce back. Okay, but how do you then continue to thrive beyond resilience? And we
Okay.
have to start thinking and planning for that.
Now, how do we get on board with this conference to become a part of these discussions and to hear these case studies being presented?
Well, you can definitely go to Caribbean Risk Management Academy.com, and there's a plethora of data there around the conference. So you can register immediately. You can register and pay. There's going to be more information on the speakers. Our keynote speaker is Mr. Warren Black, who speaks to system thinking and resilience. He's out of Australia. And we have a couple Caribbean, not just lecturers, but practitioners in the space of risk and tourism and energy. So log on to CaribbeanRiskManagement.com, and all of the information one needs, including you, Wendy, to attend the conference is right online there.
Okay, now you're speaking to two issues that have been helping to drive the region, that of tourism and then that of energy. We're now
Yeah.
looking at a whole set of renewable platforms across the region. And I'm glad to see it featured as a topic, because while we have it in place, we still need to protect it and manage it. So I'm hoping your people will help to guide and direct us on that path.
Yeah, very much so. So, and there's an energy conference happening in Trinidad sometime in late May, I think, or early June. Um, and so it augurs well for what we will be discussing. And again, the denominator across all of these industries is effective risk management, good decision making. And good decision making is the result of effective risk management. And so risk by definition is the effect of uncertainty on achieving an objective. So whether that objective is in the energy sector, in tourism, in hospitality, finance, technology, one needs to fully embrace, understand, and integrate risk effective. I think that's the operative word there. Effective risk identification and management into these various industries and disciplines. And so,
Okay.
yeah, the conference will not just speak to that, but it's tangible. This is what you can do. This is what you ought to be doing in these respective industries.
Now, what are some of your bugbears in terms of the future shocks that will present themselves to the Caribbean?
Um, so, we have been involved with a couple of major conglomerates in the Caribbean, a major public health. We're currently doing some enterprise risk management consulting for a major public health institution in the Caribbean. And my fear, and it's not just for the Caribbean, is the people risk element of it. It's the decision makers. It's the decision makers and our leadership, as to your question, the governance aspect. My fear resides there because first we have to think of it. First we have to identify it. It has to be in our heads that this is what we need to do. And experience in and of itself is a risk. So I'm not comforted by the fact that we may have politicians or business leaders who have 20 years or 30 years experience. That doesn't do anything for me as a risk practitioner or even as a business leader. So you must have folks around the table who are thinking and operating in this space. So I don't use the word risk awareness anymore or risk management awareness. It needs to be risk activation. Enough of the decision making and talking around how can we not just prevent, because some things we just can't prevent, speaking of climate risk or hurricanes, but we can't put things in place to reduce the impact when these risks eventuate. So it starts with thinking about these things, knowing the knowledge aspect of it. And again, the purpose of the conference is to drive that home. So
Okay.
we're not talking enough about anti-fragility or resilience. So the conference will drive that home. But first we have
Now,
to think it, eh?
yes, think it if you need to do it. Now, in terms of the
Yeah.
conference being hybrid, is there a cap on how many can actually attend in person versus the online?
Well, yeah, if I speak too much about that, my colleagues may beat up on me. But there has to be a cap because, again, we are intra-COVID now. So even in person, we have to limit that for proper spacing. So the in-person is going to be at the Radisson Hotel in Trinidad and Tobago. Online, well, there's no cap on the online side of it, but there is a cap to the number of folks attending. And I would like to think it's about 100, 110 folks. The room could hold much more, but for spacing purposes, and to stay within the COVID protocols, there is a cap there. So I encourage folks, and in person is always better, eh? So I encourage folks to, where possible, attend in person, but there is also going to be an online, and it is a hybrid, so you can register online. And when you go to the website, you indicate what is your preference, either
Okay.
virtual or in person. Yeah.
And if we want to get to Trinidad, we still have some time because we're talking June 15th. So there's still time to book that flight if we want to leave Barbados to attend.
Yes, you do, and I have we do a lot of work with the Kville campus of UE. A lot of my colleagues, a couple of whom will be speaking at the conference. So we are looking forward to our Barbados colleagues and friends to attend. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I wish you a successful conference, Mr. Hackshaw. And here's hoping that we think it and do it. Let's hope that
Brilliant.
message gets over. It was
Okay,
great
Wendy,
having
thanks
you.
for having me.
Have a good morning.
You cheers.
That was Mr. Ken Hackshaw, a risk management consultant. Well, he's going to be doing great work there, looking at all of the drivers within our economic industries and how we can protect and ensure that they become anti-fragile.